Rebecca, let's see if we can look at this graph right here and see if I can help explain increasing versus decreasing intervals. So when we think about an increasing, where the function is increasing or where the function is decreasing, one way to think about it is when we are looking at the graph, at what point does the graph change from increasing and then it starts decreasing again? And where is that interval located at, or where is that happening? So here, if I'm looking at this function right here, and although I'm reading the graph from the left, right, I'm reading along the x-axis from the left to the right, when I when I am looking here, notice that my x values are getting smaller. So here I'm at -2, coming up to -1.9, blah, 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 blah. So my x values are increasing, I should have said. They are increasing. They're going from really, really negative to not quite so negative. And as that's happening, right, as my x values are approaching 0, let's say, from the left, notice what's happening to the corresponding y values. They are also coming up and getting closer and closer to 0. So they start out really small, right? Very, very negative here. Both my x and my y coordinates do. So as x is getting closer to 0 or larger, right? Because I'm at -2 here, then I'm coming up and I'm going to be at -1, and then I'm coming up and I'm going to eventually be at 0. So when I go from -2 to -1 to 0, my x values are getting larger. And what's happening to those y values is they are actually getting larger also. They are increasing. So I'm not quite as negative. Here I'm at -5.5. Now I'm at -4. Now I'm at -2, and so on. So we would say that the interval on which this function is increasing is going to occur all the way from -infinity, right? Because I can start way down here, and I can, as my x values are getting larger, okay, my y values are also going to keep getting larger up to this point here at -1, 0. It's at that point when these values now start to change. So as x is still getting larger, okay, so I'm still increasing in x values, right? I went from a, -1 all the way to 0 and all the way down to +1, okay? So my x values are getting larger. What's happening to the y values? The y values this time are actually getting smaller, okay? So up here, I had a y value at, what is that, -0.5. Now all of a sudden I have a y value at -3. So my y values are actually getting smaller as my x values are getting larger. And we see that that's going to continue to happen until we get down here at this point, 1.667, right? And that's all of a sudden where my y values are going to change directions again. So I'm coming down, my y values bottom out at -0.9, and then you see that they're going to start getting larger again as I move along the x-axis, right? As my x values are getting larger. So unlike when we are looking at unlike when we're talking about domains and ranges, right? When we think domain and range, we talk about domain being all the possible x values, range being all the possible y values. Well, now we're not going to talk about that anymore. We're only going to talk about where is the function, on what interval are the values of the function, which is the output values, on what interval are the values of the function increasing, and we state that interval in terms of x's. So what that looks like, let me pull this over here for you, and let me resize it, hold on. So what that looks like here, it says, okay, we talked about the fact that the function is increasing here. The output values of y are increasing here up from all the way from negative infinity up to negative 1 on the x values. In other words, any value I put in for x from negative infinity, right here, to negative 1 causes the output values to also be increasing. Any input value I put in for x from negative 1.67 all the way to positive infinity causes the output values to be positive, or increasing, I should say. Okay, so when we think about increasing and decreasing, we talk about it in terms of the x value, what interval along x is going to cause the function to be increasing versus decreasing. And then you can see here that when we think about what interval is the function going to be decreasing, so in other words, what x values do I have to put into the function to cause the output values to be decreasing, and we can see that that's going to occur here, right, because I can see the graph is decreasing, but that occurs on the interval between negative 1 and negative 1.67. So I hope that helps clear up increasing versus decreasing for you.